considering that there's a fast pace of the data generation which is happening today, and there's a lot of innovations also happening, what specific advantage does traditional research brings onto the board?
Everybody thinks that they can do it. So DIY research, because there's so much of data available and there are tools available. I have a very specific problem. Let's say if I want to understand, will a particular product sell, or a car model, let's take an example of a car, will a particular car model sell, and to whom will it sell, and what can be provided in that. Now that, sadly, we don't see that kind of a development happening much in our country.
I mean, you mentioned it is because of the why that you're looking into the qualitative research.
Because you're trying to understand in depth why something happens. Going ahead, if we want to have a better understanding, then research knowledge has to be brought into our education. Many institutions in the US and let's say even in Europe, many universities offer such courses.
Hello and welcome to the Collaborative Canvas. I'm your host Ankesh Saxena, and I couldn't be more excited to bring you another impactful episode of Season 2, a season dedicated to learning from the wisdom of experts who truly shape their industries. Today's guest needs no introduction, Mr. Jayant Jain. He's a distinguished leader in the world of market research and consumer insights. With over 30 years of expertise across diverse sectors like FMCG, healthcare, telecom, and automotive, Mr. Jain has made an incredible mark on the field. Notably, he served as the president of Market Research Society, MRSI, where he championed research excellence and innovation. Beyond this, he's pioneer in digital business transformation and customer loyalty strategies with a proven track record of turning around businesses and building global ventures. In today's conversations, we'll explore the ongoing relevance of the traditional research methods in the increasingly digital-first world. We'll also uncover the unique value they offer, how they complement cutting-edge tools like AI, and what lies ahead of the future of the insights. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, and share this episode with anyone eager to stay ahead in the market research and the innovation. So let's jump right in. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for inviting me, Ankesh.
Before we start again, there are a couple of things I wanted to let you know. We will be keeping this episode as a educational content episode. There are a lot of things that you're going to know today would come directly from Mr. Jain, and I think it's very pivotal to understand where traditional research and technology are intersecting each other. So the first thing that I've been, closely looking at from the traditional research approach, considering what it used to be earlier those days and what is currently right now, the AI driven and the new technologies driven. What do you see this whole traditional method approach role is all about, and how it is actually shaping the current environment?
Interesting question, Ankesh. See, before I answer you very specifically to this, I would like to touch upon this whole question which is there of traditional research vis-a-vis what's called new research, right? So what is this? What are the differences between this? And what is traditional research? A lot of people today don't really understand that. So let me just delve a little bit into its history. Research started with, let's say, empirical research in the sciences, right? Where you measured different phenomena. And you had specific tools to measure this, and you understood what the limitations of those tools are, what the least counts were, And the good part with empirical research is that you try and do research which is replicable. So all your accuracy and everything, it comes in with the tools that you are using it. And anybody who does that, using that methodology, should come up with the same answer. So anybody who measures gravity for that matter, or speed of light or whatever, they'll come up with the same answer given the same boundary conditions. Obviously, if you measure gravity on Earth and Moon, it will be very different. But typically, if you measure it on Earth, the answers will be very close to each other. So those techniques were used for understanding and researching phenomena which happened in the natural world. Now, we wanted to understand human behavior. And human behavior, you understand, is not universal. Okay? There's nothing which is which is going to remain the same. Different people will behave differently. the same person will behave differently given different contexts in different situations, different moods, right? So how do you understand human beings in a method which is reliable enough? Okay? So you have to make sense out of chaos. That's when social research techniques developed, okay? Which is basically psychology, sociology, and a whole lot of other sciences which are trying to understand human behavior. Consumer research, interestingly, is a subpart of this. It takes a lot, it borrows a lot from social research, right? And therefore, the techniques that are used in consumer research have to be understood in that context. Now, social research works with the premise that when I have to try and understand a population or behavior in a particular set of people, a target audience, a population, I can study a small number of them. I can take a representative sample, which is statistically chosen to be adequate, a representative sample, study people within that or study samples within that, and then be able to project it to the entire population, right? Which is why I don't need, if I need to understand a certain pattern of behavior, I don't need to, and I say, let's say if I want to understand that in Delhi, I don't need to understand that by having to talk to everybody in Delhi. I can understand what are the different demographic groups, what are the different differences in that population, and take up people which are very similar and then represent them with a much smaller number. So different cells will get represented by a smaller number. So a smaller representative sample allows me to study this. The same principle, and which is where statistics becomes becomes the basic need for being able to do this properly. Now, similar techniques have been adopted into consumer research. Now, that's where we call it traditional consumer research, because you are going to talk to a small sample and be able to study any behavior and then be able to take it to a much larger population. Because in consumer research, which is done at a commercial level for companies or whatever, you can't go around doing that research for tens of years and whatever and at massive cost. It has to be cost effective and it has to be done in a limited period of time with the limited resources. So therefore, this becomes a massive need. It's the basic need to be able to understand how I can choose representative samples and then apply various statistical techniques to analyze my data and then be able to project it onto my target population.
I remember, sorry, I'm stopping you here. I remember a lot of organizations, and this is basically the researchers, they used to come and ask the panel companies, what sample would be appropriate. Even if they tell me what demographic, how would I be telling them that 200 interviews would be enough or 400 interviews would be enough?
Sadly, this kind of a behavior comes in from some of the smaller Nordic countries, where they'll say that a nationally representative sample within 300, right? Take a diverse country like India with so many different climatic zones, so many different religions, so many different languages, different communities, different cultures, different food habits. And it is impossible to be able to represent all of India in less than that. But thankfully, in different marketing problems, in different issues, we are not covering the entire country. You have a target audience, but even that is fairly diverse. So you have to then identify what are homogeneous cells within each of those populations and represent those. But very small numbers don't work in Indian research, right? When you try to research Indian consumers, you need to have an adequate sample size and therefore adequate budgets and adequate time and capability to do that. Okay, so coming back to my previous question. So you understood what traditional research is? Okay. Now, as opposed to that, what's happening today, and when you look at big data. So in traditional research, I identify a problem, then I design a very specific methodology to be able to answer issues related to that, and then come up with a very specific sampling plan where I look at representative samples and then go and collect very focused data from that. The volume of data is not very large, but how it is collected, in what context it is collected, what are the boundary conditions for the problem that I set, these are very specific. Okay? And therefore, the answers that I will get out of that are specific to a particular issue. It's a customized solution. As opposed to this, when we look at big data. Now, big data is available today in the internet age, where there are so many different touch points to people that data may be collected at different points in different places looking at different kinds of usage and behavior. It's not specifically collected to a problem. And it may not even be collected in one geography. So you've got global data. You've got companies which are able to give you millions of data points spread across the world. But is that where your problem rises? Now this sea of data that you've got, this humongous amount of data that you've got, you will then try and mine that data. You will then try and analyze that, run different analytics tools to try and come up with something which is good for you, which you can use in your particular problem. So you are now trying to say, I have got data and I will try and fit it to my problem. You haven't gone and customized that solution. You are now trying to say, okay, this is available to me, let me use it in the best way I can, right? So you have to understand. I mean, let me not say that both are not useful, they are useful. So just to give you a different kind of an example, you have a microscope and you have a telescope. They're both useful, right? And they both help you understand nature, at different levels. Similarly, traditional research tools based on statistics and big data analytics, they're both useful, but they come up in different contexts. So we can also customize a lot of lot of understanding that comes out of big data too. But for that, you need to understand without understanding research techniques, without understanding the basis of research and statistics, you're not even going to be able to use data. So I keep saying to people, data can be used and it can be abused. The same data can be used to promote completely diverse points of view. So you need to understand where data can be used, in what context you are trying to understand data. So that's where the difference rises. Now, when we talk about digital tools, it's not just big data. It's a whole lot of use of technology. And today, thankfully, we can adapt to try and use a lot of technology and big data analytics to research. So we are going to be, the world will keep on changing. Newer and newer technologies will keep on coming, and the consumer is also changing using this. So the good part for us is, if you understand both and you have a deep knowledge of what both can deliver, then we can do much better research.
You mentioned about the big data as I'll take it as a digital tool. So how these are complementing the traditional research at this moment? If you can give more example to it? You talk about homogeneous sample as well.
You look at what can be done today. I have a very specific problem. Let's say if I want to understand, will a particular product sell, or a car model, let's take an example of a car, will a particular car model sell, and to whom will it sell, and what can be provided in that. Now that's something where I need to go to first understand who are my target audience, who's going to buy that kind of a car, at which price point it is coming and all that. Now you are not going to get these answers directly from a lot of big data that's available in the universe. But when you are wanting to look at who would be my target audience for that basic understanding can come out of big data. See, big data can be used to, just like a telescope, it can be used to look at macro data, a lot of data, and arrive at patterns. Yeah? So it has its uses. You can look at macro patterns. You can try and understand behavior at a much larger scale, not at an individual level or not at a customer level, right? A lot of people misunderstand this. They see that since we can reach out to individual customers, I can now understand I have a segment of one. That's a complete mistake. That's a completely wrong idea. You cannot understand behavior by studying one person, because that one person's behavior itself will keep on changing given different contexts. When you want to look at it, you want to understand it in a particular scenario. That's where traditional research techniques come in. But having a lot of data available has its advantages. Now, in business research or in industrial research, trade research, where you had to collect primary data initially. Today, at least you don't have to do that. This is where a lot of this kind of data, which is already available, secondary data which is available, that comes in. You don't need to collect specific primary data. So what we need to understand is where we can use each of these. The good part with data is, if you know what context it's been collected in, where you can apply it, then you can interpret it properly.
And this is where people put a lot of effort to understand the objective behind doing a certain research, because that's where it starts rooting to a...
See, research typically the way it has evolved has been a problem solving tool. You identify a problem, you understand there is an issue to be studied, then you design a study around it and you study it threadbare. You can't take data from another piece of research and without its context apply it in entity to something else, right? Entirety. You can't do that. You have to understand why it was collected, where it was collected, from whom it was collected. The context changes.
If I talk about, you mentioned about primary research and the secondary data collection. So, and traditional research has always been very essential when it comes to understanding the nuances. How about qualitative insights when it comes to, nuances on those?
Quantitative and qualitative are distinct methodologies available to researchers, to consumer researchers, social researchers. Where you want to quantify something, look at how something happens, where it happens, what are the numbers, what are the proportions. Basic number crunching, that's where you go to quantitative. And when you want to understand why something happens in a way, why somebody behaves in a particular way, given a particular context, what will they do? And you want to have a deeper understanding, and where talking to a smaller number of people will still give you much better understanding, but it takes more time and it takes better trained researchers at times to be able to do that. That's where you do qualitative research, right? So with qualitative research, the standard techniques which are used by big data analysts and all don't really fit in. That's an area where you still need a trained and a qualified researcher to handle it directly. Right? You also need trained and qualified researchers in quantitative, because if you don't understand the basis of what you're doing, then you're going to do it completely wrong. But qualitative research is more researcher dependent than quantitative. Quantitative, once you specify a particular methodology, you design your tools, you specify what kind of analytics are going to be put into place, it can be done by different people. So the design aspect for quantitative research is the most important, and then it should become researcher agnostic. But qualitative research is where it is still dependent a whole lot on the lead researcher.
And again, you mentioned it is because of the why that you're looking into the qualitative research.
Because you're trying to understand in depth why something happens. Okay? When you try and understand deeply as to why something will happen in a particular way, that's where different kind of research techniques are used. Okay? Especially with humans.
That's exactly the point I'm trying to make. Especially, there's a human-centric approach when we talk about consumer research, and when it comes to qualitative insights specifically. And when we were coming on to the show, we were talking about how that element of research knowledge which is missing from these people. Where does, in that case, in the current state of research, where does this qualitative insights with the traditional research approach stands? Does it that element is still missing?
See, if I understand what you're trying to ask me correctly, who can do research, right? And how do you derive insights? Now, you take data, you can process that data, you can come up with a whole lot of numbers. So you can have scores, you can have your averages and whatever, all kinds of statistical numbers can be derived from data. But the researchers is required to be able to interpret the data and bring it into the context of a particular problem. So when a marketer wants to understand what do I need to do, let's say with my communication strategy, or will this ad work, or will this new product be accepted, then somebody has to understand how to interpret that data. See, this word insights is very interesting. There is no described method to come up with an insight. It's fuzzy logic. Somebody who understands the data and is able to interpret it in a particular context and understand markets and those brands and that that entire the target audience and the cohort in which it has to operate, is then able to put things together and in a very, very non-linear manner, and be able to come up with say, okay, this is what I can do which is different from before. Okay, it's very difficult to describe what's an insight. You can describe scores, so you can have a consumer satisfaction study and say, okay, what are my scores? You can have preference scores, you can have all kinds of things, but what does that translate into for you to be able to do in a very good manner so that you can come up with something which is a completely new strategy. Now, that's where very deep knowledge and understanding is required. So, qualitative and good understanding of research is what aids us into doing all of this.
And considering, it's a deep level of understanding, and with part knowledge, you probably end up making a entire, goof up of the entire objective for which the study's been run. And considering the state of market research at this point of time, I still see, people are kind of, shadowing away from being a researcher and, implementing AI technologies and, the new age tools. There are certain challenges which the modern era of market research is actually facing. And industry might need to adapt to, some new relevance. What is, as per your, and what guidance that you can actually give to the people that, this is challenge, that this can be overcome by, say, doing these things.
Okay. Again, I'll want to go to a slightly more basic. See, research is something that needs to be learnt. Okay, it's not something that you are born knowing. Okay, and with the kind of education system that we have, there are lots of areas which lack in our education. For example, at school level or even at high school level, we don't have any statistics in our courses. We don't teach research to graduates, and
We talked about insights. We talked about why qualitative is necessary. We talked about traditional research at a larger forum as well. There are a couple of things that, we keep reminding ourselves whether the research is really that important, or we just, plugging the numbers to, get some objective driven results out. We've been facing multiple challenges in the current industry. Even, when we talk about AI and new tools aging in, and how they're actually, coming up. What challenges do you see the traditional research in the coming years will face, and what is your guidance in order to, override them?
okay, see, as far as research is concerned, let me go slightly back to the basics again for research. Who can be a researcher? Who can do research? Okay. Take any profession, you need to be educated in that, right? You need to understand what are the needs of that profession. Sadly, in India, the basics needed for research are not really taught in our education curriculum. Our schools and our, even at our high school level, there is no, even at graduate level, there is no statistics in our curriculum. Okay? There is no research methodology being taught to graduates. People don't really know how to conduct research. Okay? Even management education barely touches upon that. So you don't have trained researchers coming out of our educational institutions. How do you become a researcher? By actually working under a good researcher and learning on the job. So if you're fortunate enough, as I have been, to work under very good senior researchers and learn, then you are able to understand research. If you don't, then you don't understand what research is. A lot of people today, they start in allied areas. Okay? And they may think that what they are doing is research. Telecalling is not research. Charting is not research. Analytics is not research. They are elements of it. They are doing particular parts of that job. Even being able to run a software program is not really research. Your expertise lies in different areas. You may be able to process data. Okay? Writing algorithms doesn't make you a consumer researcher. For that, you need much wider and much deeper knowledge of so many different disciplines. So that's the whole problem that we are going to face. A lot of this work happens in bits and pieces in different places, and people think that what they are doing is research. It's not really research. It's not customized, it's not specific, it's not in the context of what you are trying to do. You're just trying to fit some solution somewhere. Okay? And sadly, research is not like an aspirin pill that can be taken for just about any ill, right? It is the treatment has to be very specific to the problem that you're going to have. So going ahead, if we want to have a better understanding, then research knowledge and has to be brought into our education. People have to be trained to become good researchers. You can't just take somebody from a completely unaligned area and throw them into that function and hope that they'll be able to do a good job of it. No profession works that way. Would you want your carpenter to become your doctor? Right? So that's the whole problem. You can't let a driver become the pilot of an aircraft. Now that's what's happening with research today. Everybody thinks that they can do it. So DIY research, because there is so much of data available and there are tools available, right? Analytical tools are available. You've got so many things which can help you draw graphs, charts, whatever, and come up with a presentation. That doesn't make a research project. That's not good research. Now, that's the problem that we have to surmount for the future. Each of these tool is necessary at different stages, and it aids and enhances the quality of work that we do. But mastery over only one of these does not make a researcher. Right? You can become a one-tool carpenter, but you cannot make something which is good out of it.
And the tools are basically the facilitator. The magic of using your mind behind all these research would.
Tools have been made by people who applied their mind, but then you also, when you want to use research, use data, understand something, have to apply your mind. Being able to use a tool is a good skill, but that's not the only knowledge and skill that you need. It needs to be much wider.
And that's where the problem lies. I think a lot of people don't even understand. But I think there are larger research societies who are kind of associating with bigger institutions to develop these kind of courses. And
sadly, we don't see that kind of a development happening much in our country. That's a need for the future. That's an area where there's just one institution which today has a customized research course. Many institutions in the US and let's say even in Europe, many universities offer such courses. Our universities, our management schools will have to start thinking of being able to do that, though the market is quite small. The number of researchers.
You did mention that research industry is still not a research industry or any industry at this point of time. Considering that there's a fast pace of the data generation which is happening today and there's a lot of innovations also happening, what specific advantage does traditional research brings onto the board?
See, traditional research gives you highly customized solutions that you can use. Right? Traditional research is what you need to come up with a very specific solution. Now, let's say if you had a medical problem, you don't want to be treated just like 50 other people who may have a completely different situation than yours. You cannot have the same treatment. The treatment has to be customized. The same goes for any problem which comes up, let's say, in business, in marketing. Somebody else may be having a similar size company but operating in a different geography may not have your problem. Or the solution to their problem may not be the same that you can take. Now, the tools that you use to evaluate that problem could be the same, but the solutions will have to be different. Right? So, therefore, when you start doing research, you have to come up with a very specific understanding of what your problem is. We are not going to be able to customize unless and until you know how to design your own research. And therefore, being able to do this, you need people who have the expertise and the knowledge to be able to do this. The way that research is being done today is, we've got a software, we've got people who learn how to use a software, and they can be able to come up with my answer. Well, very good, then you should go and get your, let's say if you need a surgery, you should go to the pharmacist.
I think that's exactly where the challenge lies. And one another thing, Jayant sir, I wanted to understand from the field collection agency. I mean, because I've been throughout there have been challenges. And when we were actually talking about the new age AI tools, I remember, people are kind of focusing on building automated tools and that can ease out the quantitative research at the moment. And in fact, one of my conversations with a company, they mentioned that they can easily source people for the qualitative research. So you can actually have a deeper look onto those personal demographics. Where does, I still believe face-to-face definitely, gives an advantage when you talk to them. And there's no issue of, scarcity on the sample that you can actually look at. Where do you think, field collection agencies as on date today, stands, and what is their future in the coming years?
See, the good part with all the new technology that is coming in is that this is where it will aid us the most, which is in terms of data collection. See, one of the biggest problems that traditional research faced was you can design a very good methodology, you can come up with a very good sampling plan, but the kind of data that you would collect, actually with in-field face-to-face work, the quality of that data collection varied a lot. And this is where, because you put junk in, you get junk out. So the quality of data that you collect depended a lot on achieving the right sample in the right demographics, right? So that sample collection, that sample definition, especially in the world, is very different. See, it's very easy in physical phenomena to say, okay, I will pick up something at random. But in the world, to come up with a random sample from a very specifically defined demographic, demography is very easy. This is where a lot of new technology helps. So where my interviews happened, when it has happened, has it been done in the right way, can it be tracked? Data collection in itself. When you did data collection by using paper questionnaires, you had somebody, ask you a question and then write it down very quickly. You're not able to put all the information onto the paper. Then you transcribe it and you transferred it for analysis onto a computer. There were a lot of data transfer errors coming in. Today, if you can collect that data directly as a voice sample or even enter it directly, a lot of the errors that were there with data collection process can be removed. The speed of data collection and analysis has been very seriously enhanced. Your ability to verify and authenticate data has gone up very tremendously. So the quality of data that you can now get for research using technology is much better. This is where technology enhances research. Okay? This is where that marriage of traditional research knowledge, techniques and methodologies along with new technology is going to deliver great results for the future. Okay? Now, if you look at a lot of data which is available to me, it may not be collected in context for my problem, but if I specifically use those collection techniques to collect data for myself, then that's much better. So I want to identify particular people who are falling in the right demographic, in the right sample for me. Using big data, I can do that. And then, as you said, even face-to-face interview. Now, I can have a face-to-face discussion with you sitting, right in front of you physically, or I can do that even face-to-face sitting with you on a virtual medium. Right? The need is for me to be able to communicate effectively with you. A lot of the data which is collected today is, interestingly, the big data looks at observational data. See, in research, there is also an issue. When I ask you something and you respond back to me, you will rationalize. You will try and give me an answer which is more agreeable and acceptable to everybody. And in your brain, you rationalize. So it may not be absolutely genuine. Yes, it is genuine enough, but you may still rationalize it. When I do observations, then I am getting something which you have not rationalized. So what brand you pick up in your store and I'm observing you, or I pick that data up from the bill that you've generated, then that's not something which is rationalized. It's actually what you are buying. So different contexts that can work. Now, a lot of the data that I have in big data is observational data or is behavioral data without that context. So it has its uses. But it does not tell me what you are thinking. It does tell me what you are doing. Right? So now, when we come back to the situation whereby I understand why you want to do something or how you behave in a different, slightly different context, what will you do if I give you something which is different, that is something that you still need to ask. Now, those kind of data collections are also getting enhanced with the newer techniques. So digital tools can be used in data collection. And digital tools enhance the quality of data collecting that is happening. Big data analytics helps me in identifying the right sample and being able to reach out to them. I have to do research in purely the traditional manner, and I want to do that research in, let's say, 30 cities across the country, the cost of reaching them and the time of reaching them is going to be tremendously high. Using new digital tools, if I can do it virtually, then it reduces the time and the cost tremendously. It makes it much easier to reach out to a much wider audience in a much wider context across bigger, more geographies. So yes, If you look at the advantages of using new technology along with traditional research knowledge, then you come up with very good solutions. It's fantastic to be able to, marry these two and come up with a hybrid.
I think exactly I was thinking about it because in the context of India, the tier has always been a challenge. You go to the metropolitan, cosmopolitan, get the study done, but when it comes to 3 and 4, you don't have a chance to do. This is what we are talking about as research, and it's a never-ending process. And we cannot just wrap it up the insightful conversation with Mr. Jain by just saying, thank you for your time. I really wanted to, give more questions out to him and reach more questions, answered by him because there's no ending to, how we see research at this point of time. So what we have done, we have explored how traditional methods complement digital tools. They provide depth and the reliability, and they remain essential for capturing the nuances of the human behavior that brands need to connect with consumers. It's clear that the current state of market research and the future of the research isn't a choice between tradition and innovation. It's a harmonious blend of both. If this conversation resonated with you, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with your network. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel and turn on the notifications so you always get the first of these episodes right in your inbox. Season 2 is getting just started, and we have more incredible guests and discussions coming your way. Stay tuned, stay curious, and as always, keep pushing the boundaries of your learning and growth. Until next time, take care.